Shalom. Today is the 9th of November. It is 5:30 p.m. here in Israel, about 10:30 a.m. on the Eastern Coast. It is the 34th day of the war, and we got a bunch to comment on. So let's jump into it. So first, let's start with good news. Israel has, as we mentioned in yesterday's video, continued to capture more and more land and continuing to capture Hamas strongholds. What a stronghold is on a big basis is where Hamas is holed up together, where they have a lot of forces and a lot of weapons, and we are succeeding in being able to knock those places out. We have found a place where Hamas is building drones, and we've knocked that out. We found 130 tunnels so far and knocked them out of commission. So that is those are great numbers. Those are great numbers, and they show a mode of success. Again, a lot of people, might be feeling a little out of patience. It's been 4 weeks, and it's difficult to measure progress when we're not privy to the information that would allow us to understand what was really happening. But be confident. The soldiers are coming back from Gaza with good reports. They're saying that they're succeeding. All signs look good, and in that sense, we're fortunate and we're blessed, and we're very proud of our soldiers and the job that they're doing, and of our leadership. We're in Gaza City, and we are battling all the way up to the hospital base of where they are, and we're slowly starting to almost get to Hamas's headquarters. It'll be days, maybe even less, until we're able to take that over and really weaken Hamas. Interesting news that the Americans had floated the idea of maybe after the war is over and Israel feels that it has accomplished its goals, and then it becomes the next day in Gaza of saying that Egypt should temporarily rule until the Palestinians are able to rule themselves, or the Palestinian Authority is able to rule themselves. Now, anybody that has a sense of what Palestinian rulership looks like, and I can't understand why the Americans don't feel that they have this sense, or unless they're just dreamers, knows that this is going to be, I don't know, years, decades until the Palestinians are able to govern themselves. It's clear that every leader that they've had, whether it be in Hamas or Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, have all been corrupt and have all seen leadership as a way to personal riches and cronyism, as opposed to helping their people. So I'm sure that when the Americans said this to Egypt and said, we'd like you to consider temporarily ruling until the Egyptians, until the Palestinians are able to take over. I'm sure they looked at this and laughed and said that could be decades. So no, and they turned America down. It seems, in the previous videos we've talked about the fact that America is looking weak because they are not hitting Iran back, when 46 American soldiers have been injured in various different attacks by Iran against them. Well, supposedly last night, America and Israel jointly attacked an Iranian proxy inside of Syria and killed 15 soldiers associated with Iran. So I hope that's true, and I hope that sends a strong message to Iran that they better cut it out. Okay, in Congress, Rashida Tlaib was censored for saying that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and saying, even though she tried to explain it afterwards by saying that it's not a call for the end of Israel, which it is, but rather an aspiration of freedom. So you might have seen me put this in a tweet, but that's equivalent to saying that Sieg Heil, which was the German, sort of what they would do when they would put their hands up and salute Hitler, was not anti-Jewish. It was just a cheer for the aspirations of the German people. And they will not replace us, which was chanted by white supremacists about Jews in Charleston, South Carolina, in West Virginia, excuse me, wasn't a cheer against Jews, but it was rather just an aspiration for American freedom. And from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free isn't anti-Semitic or calling for the end of Israel. It's an aspirational call for the freedom of the Palestinian people. Yes, it is for the freedom of the Palestinian people, but also by way of the end of Israel. Anyone that doesn't recognize this is either naive, ignorant, or purposely biased and anti-Semitic and trying to cover up. Rashida Tlaib's idea of peace in the Middle East is Jews and Palestinians living side by side in a Palestinian state, not two-state solution of Israel and the Palestinians next to each other. She does not recognize the right of a Jewish state. And that is a problem. And that is how you know that when she says, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, she is speaking anti-Semitically. She might consider the end of Israel not to be an anti-Semitic idea because she doesn't think that Israel has anything to do with Judaism. And that's very nice, but we don't allow people from other nations to define what is and what is not anti-Semitic, especially her. So Congress took a vote and they censured her. Censure doesn't have any ramifications, but it's immensely embarrassing. And for history now, she will always be known as being censored for anti-Semitism. Okay. Israeli forces are slowly clearing the north. I should have said this before, but we're really making progress up north. Last night's Republican debate talked about for a great amount of time. There's a Republican primary debate. President Trump doesn't attend these debates. He feels like he doesn't need to. But the other people who will have leading roles in the Republican Party for decades, these are all young people, and they talked about Israel and its fight against Palestinian terror, and all united talk about the ability to give Prime Minister Netanyahu a green light to do what needs to be done to protect Israel. Okay, and great news up on the northern border. Hezbollah has been trying many different things. We mentioned this yesterday in yesterday's video. Been trying many different moves to try and get a foothold up north, from blowing up the wall between Israel and Lebanon to sending missiles over the border from Lebanon to Israel, and it is all spectacularly failing. They have not had one victorious move. Israel is playing this both in Gaza and in Lebanon incredibly smart, not opening themselves up to attack, being very careful about where they're stepping and what they're opening themselves up to. And they have killed hundreds of members of Hezbollah. They have taken out tens of Hezbollah sites, and Israel itself has barely suffered any consequences for this, any losses. So that is a great thing. On to some bad news. Today we buried Rose Lubin. I mentioned her a couple of videos ago. Rose was an immigrant from America, from Georgia. She had, for those that have done NCSY and JSU, she had attended as a high school student JSU trips to Israel. She had made Aliyah through Garid Savar and being on a Nefesh B'Nefesh flight. We're partners with them, and Rose was really loved by just so many people. And it's incredibly tough to lose somebody like that. She was on guard duty outside of Jerusalem's old city. She was what's called the Magavnik. She was part of Israel's border police, which is a combination of police officers and members of the army. She was on patrol, and a 16-year-old Palestinian terrorist came up and stabbed her, and she unfortunately died due to her wounds. She was buried this morning as a hero, and she will always be a hero. On her Herzl at a funeral that hundreds attended, giving her a proper send-off. 34 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, have been killed since the start of this war, in addition to the 300 soldiers that died on October 7th. And this is it's tough. Every soldier, as we mentioned last night, every soldier is a loss. It's very hard to try to contextualize loss of soldiers and say that we're doing well, we're doing poorly. Any military that had waged a 4-week war and a major war and only lost 34 soldiers would consider that a tremendous success. But it's very hard to look at that as successful when there are 34 soldiers not there. There were terror attacks here in Yehuda Shomron. I feel like it's hard for me to give a briefing on what goes on in Yehuda Shomron because I'm so connected to it by being here and by being an advocate for Jews inside Yehuda Shomron. I've dedicated a lot of my life to helping people understand the right of Jews here in Yehuda Shomron. So it's difficult for me to say, but please understand that There is no terror attacks that are acceptable. And last night there were Palestinian terror attacks inside of the Shomron, and a Jew was killed, another one severely injured. That's something that should never be okay and should never happen. In great hypocrisy, the United States State Department and even the President of the United States has criticized settler violence here in Yehuda v'Shomron, but they never say anything about Palestinian terrorism here. And there is, without a doubt, 10 times the amount of Palestinian terrorism in this region than there is settler violence. So why does settler violence get mentioned by the State Department, by the American ambassador, by the Secretary of State, by the President of the United States repeatedly? But yet they fail to mention Palestinian terror, which is a scourge that is much greater than settler violence. That's a shame, and it's a black mark on the United States of America. And one day that story will be told. Speaking of stories that need to be told, journalists are supposed to be people that are serving the public and helping the public understand what is going on. They're supposed to be moral people. They're supposed to be people that help the world become a better place. That's the role of journalism. A story broke yesterday on honestreporting.com that there were 4 journalists that worked as freelancers for Reuters, the Associated Press, the New York Times, and CNN, who were embedded with the Hamas fighters on October 7th early in the morning. Now, to understand what that means, it means that they didn't wake up in the morning and hear shooting and run out and record it. They had to have been told beforehand where they should be, which means that they knew ahead of time that something big, if not the entire plan, was going to happen, but they knew it would be big enough for it to be a story for them to cover. And they did not tell their bosses, they did not tell the Israeli authorities, and they could have saved lives. And one of those reporters been told, and had one of those reporters told somebody, the American State Department, one of their bosses, told the Israelis that, hey, Hamas is planning something tomorrow, we could have upped our security. There is blood on those journalists' hands and on the companies that pay them. Many of the pictures that they took that morning were bought, paid for by afterwards, not before, afterwards, by the news agencies that I named, by CNN, New York Times, by Reuters, and by Associated Press. And they knew that those pictures were the product of bloody hands. And yet they published them and paid for them anyway. There has to be a price for that. That cannot just go unnoticed. On to analysis. I think it's just important as we end the week to reiterate that Israel did not want this war. Israel didn't choose this war. Israel didn't desire this war. This is a war that was put on to Israel by Palestinian terrorists. And therefore, when the world turns to us and says, there are so many Palestinians that are dying, they shouldn't be blaming Israel. Yes, they are our bombs that are directly killing them. But our bombs are meant for Palestinian terrorists. They are not aimed at civilians. Civilians are accidental collateral damage. They are not the intended targets. The people to blame for that are Hamas, who started this war and knew full well what the Israeli response would have to be while they were beheading babies. When they chose that, they chose to put their people in harm's way. The world should be condemning Hamas, not Israel. It's a superficial take to condemn Israel for Palestinian deaths when Israel did not start this war. Let's get to questions, and we'll go from there. So the first question is the following. So based on your YouTube reports, it seems that like you think the wisest course of action in Gaza is to take out all the terrorists without installing a new governmental organization. How will this be successful? Don't we learn from America's exploits in Iraq and Afghanistan that creating power vacuums in what are already known to be toxic cultures leads often to even worse actors taking over? Not that it necessarily can get much worse. Wouldn't it be wiser to have some plan to prevent a total vacuum? I think the question is based on a premise that's misunderstanding the point of what Israel's trying to accomplish here. Yes, when America attacked Iraq and America attacked Afghanistan, the results were a much worse Iraq and Afghanistan. But there were no more attacks on the United States of America. And that was America's goal. America's goal was not to make Iraq and Afghanistan a better place. That politicians might have said that, and politicians might have tried to explain to people that didn't understand the purpose of the war that there might be some benefit to this war that they're not taking into consideration. Israel is not attacking Gaza to make Gaza a better place. Israel is attacking Palestinian terrorists in Gaza now to ensure that those Palestinian terrorists are dead and Israel will not get attacked again. If Gaza ends up in complete and total chaos, worse than it is today, that is not Israel's problem. Israel's problem is to make sure that that chaos does not spread to Israel. So it takes out the people that have the wherewithal today to hurt Israelis. Then it seals up Gaza. Now, if Gaza turned into a democracy and a peace-loving place that was, with free markets, and would that make it easier for Israel to be safe and secure? Yes. But we have no confidence that that's going to happen because Palestinian leadership has never wanted that to happen for their people. So Israel has one job right now, one job and one objective. And if that goal and objective, well, to secure Israel by wiping out the terrorists and bringing the hostages home, if that results in total and complete chaos in Gaza, not Israel's problem. Israel's problem is to make sure. Now, you might put the argument that chaos will be worse for Israel, but I don't think so. I think that it'll buy Israel at least a decade or two of not having to worry about threats coming in from Gaza. And then next generation, that's on the world and that's on the Palestinians. And that's on Israel to make sure it doesn't take its eye off the ball anymore when it comes to securing itself against Palestinian attacks. Okay, let's go on. Next question. How much percent of Hamas groups are left in Gaza? I have no idea. I don't know how much. I don't know how to judge that. Okay. Israel often says accurately that it does not ask U.S. soldiers to fight Israel's wars. Israelis fight Israel's wars, but the converse is or should also be true. The United States should not rely on Israel to rescue American hostages. In Israel, there have been reports of U.S. Special Operation Forces based in or around Israel ready to act to save Americans held hostage in Gaza. Yeah, it's an excellent question. As an American citizen, I would be, I'd be upset. I'm also an Israeli citizen, so I have two concerns to take into account. But as an American citizen, knowing that there are American hostages being held in Gaza, my question to the American Army and to the American leadership is, why are you not getting our hostages back? We have special forces that have the abilities to do this. There are reports that there are special forces in Israel, but they seem to be like consultants helping Israel find their hostages. They still to this day I have no idea what that means. I don't know if they're sitting around the table telling Israel, "Oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?" I don't know if they're flying drones and they're intelligence officers and they're helping Israel trace things. I don't know. They're not obviously telling the public, so I don't know. If you were in charge for Israel, would you do the deal where Israel would halt in exchange for 15 hostages, or is 15 not enough to do the halt? That's a great question. I think that look, I'm not privy to all the information, so my answer here is not complete and is not at the level of expertise. But it seems like 15 is a low number, and the idea that somebody might say yes, but 15 is more than zero. How can we tell these 15 people who could be saved that they're not going to be saved now? I think we need to be thinking in large pictures. And I know I don't have any family members that are hostages, nor any friends. So it's easy for me to say my vantage point might be different if it was one of my children being held hostage. But I think that you have to take a look at what's best for the nation here. And I think what's best for the nation is that we eliminate Hamas as our number one objective. And our number two objective is to get the hostages back. And we try to accomplish both. Do you think Hezbollah in communication with Hamas or other terrorist groups in Gaza to decide when to fire missiles, or are they just attacking Israel? Israel's more focused on the war. I don't think that Hamas and Hezbollah are in touch, but I think that Iran is in touch with both of them. And I think that Iran might be directing both of them. And Iran, in its calculus, has both forces in mind when it asks each of them to do something. So, for instance, the other day, there was both Hamas and Hezbollah fired the exact same missile, which is the first firing of this Iranian-provided missile that they both had, and they fired it at the same time. So that's obviously a level of coordination. Somebody is coordinating within their organizations, but I don't think that it's the full coordination that the questionnaire imagines. And how could we know until Israel is safe and secure? Is if there's always going to be some kind of potential threat? Yeah, I think that it's a good question. That how are we ever going to know who's hiding underground? I think that as we start killing members of Hamas in the thousands, and we start knocking out their weapons facilities and their bases, I think we're going to start getting an image of and when the attacks lower, and that was when there are less attacks on Israeli soldiers, when Israeli soldiers can go through whole swaths of land in Gaza without getting attacked, I think we're going to realize that there are less Hamas forces, and eventually those attacks will become so infrequent that we'll realize that we have essentially eliminated Hamas from the area. You mentioned how Israel's army is much smarter than Hamas's, and their terrorist attacks, and that sooner or later Israel wins this war easily. How can you be so sure of that just because Israel countered this specific attack? So it's not based on one attack that I'm asking the question. I'm basing it on the fact that Israel has many more soldiers. It has a technological advantage. It has better weaponry. All those factors considered together, just at a certain amount of time, we're going to have won that war. Do you think Hezbollah will be able to succeed in crossing the border and reaching Israeli soldiers? So far, they have not. Israel has. I can't tell you how they're doing it, but they are. I mean, Hezbollah is the brunt of it, so they understand how it's happening. But they are failing at crossing that border. They have yet to successfully cross the border. It is pretty amazing. Obviously, we've got drones looking, and we've got other surveillance material looking, and obviously we learned a lot from when Hamas was able to cross the border, what we should not have up north, and we've probably taken corrective actions on that. What are some of the strategic mistakes made by Hamas in the recent conflict, and how these mistakes contributed to the weakening position in the conflict against Israel? A lot of the mistakes that they've made strategically have been they've been popping out of tunnels when soldiers are standing nearby. They're getting more and more desperate, and the desperateness of their actions has led them to mistakes that have gone to Israel's advantage. You're saying Israel evacuated the building before taking them out. Do you think Hamas is purposely trying to keep civilians in Gaza in the buildings and dangerous areas so that they can raise the kill count? Yes, that is documented. We do know that Hamas is doing that. That's not a question, do I think so? We know that Hamas has threatened people in Gaza and told them that they must stay in their homes. That we know for sure. That is a definitive thing. And they're trying to get Israel to raise the civilian kill rate, because that gets the anger of the world up, and that starts turning the tide against Israel and pressuring Israel for a ceasefire. And we're watching that in the streets of the world, people pressuring Israel to take a ceasefire. How will the IDF be able to keep their security and manage both the north and the south attacks if Hezbollah were to achieve a break in the country, into the country? Will that make an even greater attack more susceptible, since Israel will be splitting their forces within the borders? So let me read that again. Will the IDF be able to keep their security and manage both north and south attacks if Hezbollah were able to achieve a break into the country? Yeah, they'd have to stop the break. Now, it depends on how big the break is, but yes. Will that make an even greater attack more susceptible, since Israel will be splitting their forces? Israel's forces are already split. They already have forces down south and forces down up north waiting for a Hezbollah attack. So it won't make us any weaker. We already have the forces split. What has the United States done to contribute to Israel throughout this war? America has provided security information. They've provided some weapons, and they've put 2 carrier strike groups and a nuclear submarine in the waters off the coasts of Iran and Lebanon. I'm getting the message across that if Hezbollah or Iran get involved, they will have to feel the brunt of Israeli power. Do you think that the more Israel attacks and invades Gaza through the ground offensive, will Hezbollah get more involved throughout the war? And what reaction will the USA have? I'm not sure, because it's all up to Iran. Iran are not rational actors. Hezbollah is not a rational actor, so I have no idea what they're going to do. I think if Hezbollah starts getting involved at a level that the United States feels is unacceptable, America will begin to start bombing Hezbollah positions. Israel is currently in the south of Gaza, but will be doing anything about the north of Gaza? No, it's the opposite. Israel's currently in the north, and eventually they'll get down to the south. But right now they're clearing out the north. Hezbollah's forces are mostly centered in the north, so Israel wanted to take those out, cut off the south, in order to make sure that Hamas wasn't able to restock and resupply. What caused Israel to change its mind to negotiate for some of the hostages instead of all? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Israel did. From what I understand, I don't know this for sure, it's Israel that's holding up the hostage negotiations. So I'm not sure Israel has changed its mind. Given Israel's ongoing concerns about Gaza's actions and government systems even after the war, wouldn't it be more advantageous for them to reclaim control of the land and exercise autonomy in making decisions that prioritize their security and safety. The only problem with that of Israel retaking Gaza is that it will now have to rule over 2 million more Palestinians, which is a recipe for disaster because those Palestinians are not going to accept Israeli rule. So you're going to constantly be fought at. Do you think anything is going to happen to the leaders of Hamas who are very wealthy and live in Qatar? I think eventually, once Israel gets the hostages back and these people have nothing on top of them, Israel's going to take them out. I think these people know they're marked for death. Does the goal of completely eradicating Hamas conflict with the goal of getting all the hostages back safely? I'm having trouble understanding what happens once Hamas is backed into a corner and tries to use their final bargaining chip of releasing hostages in exchange for not being killed, and conversely threatening to execute hostages if the IDF does not advance at that point. Will the Israeli government make a deal that secures the lives of the hostages, even if it means allowing a God to live, so to speak, or is it not? Or is that not how you think this will play out? Thanks for the updates. Okay, so there are. I think that the key here is that yes, to a certain extent, Israel wants it all. Israel wants its cake, wants to eat it too. It wants to bomb Hamas, destroy all of Hamas, and get the hostages back. At a certain point, that's clear. Hamas is going to realize that it's going to lose. And it's going to be staring at the faces of 200 Israeli hostages, which are very valuable. And they are going to start doing horrendous things to these hostages in order to evoke either an Israeli surrender, an Israeli ceasefire, or to be able to negotiate some sort of trade for Hamas prisoners. Israel needs to be able to get the hostages out before that happens. Is that mission impossible? Very possible. I don't know. And we don't know how this is going to play itself out. We don't know if Israel has some secret trick up its sleeve, or Israel's just hoping to wipe out enough Hamas members before this, so Hamas can't even go ahead and do that. But at its core, 100%, the goal of destroying Hamas and getting the hostages back, they do conflict each other at some point. Right now, it seems clear that Israel is putting way more attention into killing members of Hamas, which serves the national security interests of the country, but more so than getting the hostages back. I'm not sure how this plays out. There are so many different variables that can play itself out. I'm not sure which way it goes, because there's just if we would start playing this out and outlining the different variables, it would be hours until we would finish. If Israel keeps sending troops into Gaza, do you think Hezbollah will join the war more? Okay, so the answer to that, do people who support the Palestinians hate Jews or ignorant or truly believe that Israel has wronged Palestinians? A lot of them hate Jews. They might not realize they hate Jews, but they hate Jews because they want to deny Jews their rights. That's hateful behavior. I might say I love African Americans, but I think it's in their best interest to be slaves. That's a hateful comment. That means I hate Black people. That's clear. I might think I love Black people. I just think that the best thing for them is slavery. So I think the best thing for Israel is taking the moral high ground and giving the land to the Palestinians, who are the true owners of the land. That's not love for the Jewish people. That's hate for the Jewish people, and that's anti-Semitic. And that's what you're doing when you support Palestinians at the expense of the Israeli state. Will supporting a ceasefire resolution damage any nation's relationship with Israel? Yes, I think that if a country came out and started pushing for a ceasefire, Israel would say, you're not really a friend, 100%. Are any members of the wartime coalition more popular with the Israeli public than others? Yeah, I think that Benny Gantz is becoming more and more popular as it goes on. He seems to be, people are looking at him as a mature, solid face of somebody who wasn't responsible for what happened until this point, because he was out of the decision makers, and now he's a decision maker when things are going well. So I think that was a very smart move of his to get involved. I think Yair Lapid is going to suffer politically for not joining the government coalition and the unity government. I think people are going to remember when the country came together, he played politics and wouldn't unite. I don't know whatever justification he's going to give, that he felt that Bibi was so bad, that I think people are going to look at that and say, okay, look, buddy, it was war. We all stuck together, and you stayed out of it. Do you have any thoughts on the Republican debate? I've mentioned it. Can any candidate significantly change U.S. policy on Israel? Yes, 100%, for sure. I think that many of them will. Or are their chances of winning the election too low? Well, that's another question. If they get elected, obviously, that's the only time they're going to have They're gonna have, but I think if President Trump gets elected, then American policy changes. So I think the only way foreign policy stays the same and relationship with Israel stays the same is if President Biden gets reelected. But I think that everything changes once there's a new president by definition. Okay, that is the end of our session and video, and I hope everybody has Shabbat Shalom. We won't be having videos for the next 2 days until Sunday. But we'll hopefully do that then, and wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. We should have peace, we should have justice, we should have victory, we should have our hostages back safely and soundly. Shabbat Shalom.